So we've started taking the GL1100 apart now. Didn't show you the first bit because there wasn't really a lot to show you. To get the tank off, there's 2 bolts at the front, one here, one on the other side, and then there's 2 bolts down here, which once you've got the seat off, which I'll show you in a minute, those 2 bolts and the 2 at the front, and the tank, it's a bit fiddly to get off, but you can get it up over the top of all this. As you can see, this bike's been stood for a long time, and it's going to need a serious clean once we get the engine out. The seat itself, it's just held on at the back by, it's such an old bike, 1980 bike, there's no key that flips the seat open or anything. You've got a bolt this side which is just in front of the grab rail, and Allen bolt and an Allen bolt on the other side, exactly the same. You take those off, the seat pulls back, there's a little lip that sits on there. I'll get the seat out, I can show you. That's the front of the seat, there's a little lip there, and you just pull it backwards and the seat comes off, which then was handy that we could get the tank off because we haven't got the key for the tank or the ignition. I've found a key that goes in, but it's not actually turning the ignition, so it's something I've got to have a look at at some time in the future. And then all we did was there's just an airbox out here, there's a little wing nut, take that off, take the air filter out. Then there's 2 drain hoses, or breather hoses, which run on each side of the bike, which come off here, and unclip those. Bit fiddly, but eventually the whole box will come out and leaves you free to start working on the carburetors. We did take the spark plugs out and connected a battery to just the starter solenoid, just to see how seized it was, and it's not moving. The starter's trying to do it, but it's not moving. So we've got to go a bit more in depth, try and get the crank turned and stuff to see how bad the seizure is and where it's coming from. However, we took the plugs out, and 3 came out really easy. The last one decided to snap. So this was getting stripped down anyway. To be honest, I don't think even Plus Gas would have, looking at the plug inside, I don't think even Plus Gas would have got that, would have released that. So when we get the heads off, I'll just get that sent away and get it drilled out, or spark eroded out, and that'll save the threads. So it's, it's one of those things. You get a bike that's this old and been stood for so long, little things like that happen. Can't be helped. We didn't have the video camera about at the time when we took the carbs off. They're quite easy to get off. We'll show you basically how you put them back on, but it's just 2 bolts on each of the inlet manifolds. There's a few cables and stuff, and disconnect the fuel pump. But they come off quite reasonably easy. We did have to take a couple of the diaphragm covers off for it actually to get out from the frame. The throttle cables were seized, so we had to cut them. Then we took the radiator off. There's 4 bolts on the front of the radiator, which basically does the whole thing. There's 3 bolts on the back for the fan, which you'll see a few pictures of in a minute. It was easier to disconnect the bolts off the fan and then take the bottom hose off, which has got the water pump in. Disconnect that, obviously after draining the fuel, draining the water first, which is a little plug next door to the bottom hose, which you can drain your coolant out into a suitable container, and then take the top hose off as well. That has the thermostat in. Said it was easier to get the fan off. We had to take the fan off, I should say, disconnect it from the back of the radiator before we took the carbs off, because that little dome on the back of the fan was getting in the way of the carburetors, trying to pull the carburetors out. Not sure if we were doing it wrong, but it just needed disconnecting so we could actually move it. In the video I'm just using a heat gun to warm up the exhaust. So then the next step, we took the engine protection bars off, which were quite fiddly to get off, but you can take them off with the exhaust in place. And then we had to start taking the exhaust off, which I think, because it had been stood for quite a while, as you can see from the time-lapse video, it was a matter really of just manoeuvring around, both two people, one on each side, John and myself, basically moving backwards and forwards, bit of plus gas in there, bit of a fiddle, and pieces of wood with hammers too. Trying to beat him. There's no downpipes and a silencer, it's all one. Two downpipes into one silencer, and there's no split. All you've got is the balancing pipe in the centre between the downpipe and the silencer itself on each side. Quite difficult to get off. You can watch a lot of videos with a nice clean workshop and everyone's got gloves on and everything's all pristine, but unfortunately a lot of people don't have the money to do that. They've just got a garage, they work on the bike, and I'd sooner show you a video trying to do it this way, because a lot of people have got to do it like that, you know. That's the way it is. No swearing now, John. Okay, so the next part that you need to do is there's a section of the bottom of the frame which gets taken out because the engine comes out sideways out of the it's the only way you can get it out. That's the way it's designed. There's no way you can lift it out with the oil filter and everything at the front, and the way the drive shaft and everything is as well. So you can see John there, he's just undoing all the bolts which are actually holding that on. There's a main bolt that's underneath, which goes right through to the other side of the engine. Knock that through, a little bit of tapping with rubber hammers or rubber mallets or hide mallets without damaging anything, and that comes off. Then you have to disconnect the drive shaft, which it can be fiddly on the other side. Pull the rubber gaiter back. There's a circlip actually inside on the spline. If you spin the rear wheel round, once the gaiter's off, you can actually, there's two sort of windows that you can actually see the circlip itself to take it out. Once you've located the circlip, then put it into gear so it can't move. We had to pull the clutch cable through, mainly because this bike has been stood for so long, a lot of the stuff's seized. So it was just, a clutch cable got pulled through, rev counter cable got pulled through. We then knocked that bottom bar out, right out through to the left hand side, so that it was free completely out of the way. Then we started tackling Other point, make sure you drain the oil. Sump plug is next to the oil filter. Should be about 4.4 litres or a gallon, something like that. Then there's two delta plates, little triangular plates on the back of the top of the engine, which need taking off. The delta plate on the right hand side of the engine you most probably don't have to take out completely. You can leave it there, but you have to take the bottom bolt that goes right through the engine to the other left hand delta plate. But the left hand delta plate you have to take off completely for the engine to come out of the frame. When I get out of the way, I will say that it's a lot easier with two people taking an engine out like this. If it was on a hydraulic stand, one person could most probably do it, but you wouldn't be able to get the engine out by yourself unless you had an engine hoist or something like that, which could sort of pick it up and bring it out sideways. You just wouldn't be able to do it. Two people, it's a lot easier with two people doing this. Is it a bit tight? Straightforward Japanese bike engines are a lot easier to get out of a frame than a flat four. I know I've compressed a lot of this into it's only around about 15 minutes of this, but it did actually take around about an hour and a half altogether to actually get all this undone. Then you have you've got a plate at the front which sits down onto the front of the carb, where the front of the carburetors were, and there's a couple of rubber sleeves that sit over the top of the frame as well. We had to slacken some of those off to actually get the carbs out, but didn't have to take it off completely. But it is bolted to the engine, and there's 4 bolts. Easy to see. You can see me taking one off there, and then there's one obviously on the left hand side of the frame, and then there's 2 up above, which you'll see me taking one of the others off in a minute. You might hear a couple of cracks and stuff on some of these bolts when we're actually releasing them, but it's only because they've been sat there. You know, this bike's been stood for I don't know how many years, but for a long time. So everything's going to be sort of seized or whatever, and a bit of plus gas, you can get that from any local motor factor's store. Plus gas is great. One of the best things that was ever invented. 40-year-old bolts, seized up, bit of plus gas in there, and they come undone. Great stuff. While I'm doing this, John's just trying to sort out the last of the
engine definitely moves that.
Sorting out the delta plate on the other side, and he's just tapping that bolt out now.
So forget, take the 2 off the top as well.
Might as well just pull the whole thing off.
I meant to mention earlier, when we took the carburetors off, that right hand inlet manifold where the spark plug had snapped, that was full of water. So it does look like that side of the engine is most probably what's seized. So it's either something to do with something overheating, or maybe a valve's dropped, or that head split or something like that, because it was just, all the other ports were fine, it was just that one was full of water.
Well, I'll start clearing up that
Yeah, grab all the
crap off.
So the left-hand delta plate's getting taken off now.
there's a box, there's a couple of boxes up there. If you need.
Well, I'm trying to return as much of the
I call it a delta plate, but it's, you know, it's just a triangular plate.
so we know
We use delta plates on audio speaker hangs in rigging. They're a little bit bigger than weigh a damn sight more than these little ones, but it's a triangular plate. We just call it a delta plate. Always make sure that all the electrical connectors are disconnected. As we found, our little mistake, the two we missed, which you couldn't see until you actually started pulling the engine out, were the stator connector and the pulses connector, which are actually sat on a plate a little bit further down on the left hand side, behind where the side panel sits normally.
I reckon. Yeah, well,
just need to try that.
you've got
The plastic connectors just broke because they were that old and just been sat in heat and stuff, I suppose, over the years. They might have to replace them.
It's caught on the gator onto the drive shaft.
the oil filter.
Right, okay.
So it needs to lean forwards.
So it's these like lean up this way.
Easily go.
And then the only thing you need to do then is, as you saw, the oil filter there can get caught. So once you've actually got the engine loose, you just drop the trolley jack down a tiny little bit,
The old fuels.
and then
Which way? Does it need to spin around this way?
Well, I wondered whether it's worth dropping it down a bit so we can get the oil filters catching at the moment.
Yeah.
So we drop it down.
Just
You've
check.
got-
Is it going to catch anything on the side of the cross?
so John's just disconnecting the pulser connector and the stator.
So we get around it.
As I said, we missed those as we were concentrating on trying to get the engine out. As long as the trolley jack is in the centre of the bottom of the sump, it's reasonably well balanced. It's not too difficult.
How heavy is this?
But then you've got to move it.
Do you want to get a little force around balancing?
So we did actually pick it up on the water hose pipes. In all fairness, it's,
We're going on the water hose?
you know, those pipes will take a fair bit. All we did was just lift it, put it on the floor, and that was it. Then we got hold of we had to get it up onto the bench, which we did in two lifts. One onto that little chair or little table that you can see.
Right, you ready to get it up?
Well, I can't get in.
And we'll swap sides. We'll be on the space.
And then up we go.
2, 3.
Nearly there.
This is where an engine hoist really comes in handy. I don't think we've got the room though, especially with my belly.
How do you need an engine hoist? And it's on the bench.